ओम अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नमो ओं विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वतीदेवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषशून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासदि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। So we are beginning the third part of our decision making seminar. Go ahead. Yeah. So this is a famous example where Napoleon underestimated the Russian winter. Similar mistake was made by Hitler also, and then ultimately they had to retreat, and it became the beginning of the end. Go ahead. Srila Prabhupada at that point in Mayapur was having some conversation with Tamal Krishna Maharaj. And then at one point of time, Prabhupada said, maybe you should go to China. Tamal Krishna Maharaj himself said, maybe then I should go to China. And Prabhupada immediately took it and said, yes, you should go to China. And what turned out was the beginning of a very interesting exposure of Krishna consciousness to many people who have been so far not exposed to Krishna consciousness movement. And Srila Prabhupada was really taking Srila Saraswati Thakur's instruction very seriously of spreading Krishna consciousness across the entire globe. And therefore, when Prabhupada was a Grihastha in Kolkata, he was living in Sitakant Banerjee Lane, and sometimes he would go out for doing preaching with another devotee called Govinda Brahmachari. Govinda Brahmachari later became the successor to Bhakti Sundar. He became the successor to Sridhar Maharaj, and he was known as Bhakti Sundar Govinda Swami. So at that time, he shares his experiences of Srila Prabhupada's preaching spirit, that Prabhupada was a Grihastha but still totally dedicated to spreading Krishna consciousness. He would take Govinda Brahmachari with him and say to him that you are Brahmachari, you are in saffron, people will respect you, take you more seriously, you come with me. And he would say that, Govinda Brahmachari would say, I am a new person, I don't know much katha and everything. Prabhupada said, don't worry, you just come. And then Prabhupada would take him, and in a program, Prabhupada would make him sit on the Vyasasana, do the initial kirtan. And then, when the kirtan was over and the crowd had assembled, then Prabhupada, sitting in the audience, would turn towards the audience and give full lecture. And then after that, Prabhupada would tell the audience, you go and take his blessings. So Prabhupada had an intense preaching spirit all through his Grihastha days. He had 5 children, one of them, Prayagraj, got involved in some kind of a affair with some girl, and then it didn't work out and he became mentally imbalanced, and he would go around Calcutta picking rags. So Prabhupada's Grihastha life was not all smooth. He had challenges, he had difficulties, and what to speak of the business challenges which are well documented. But still, Srila Prabhupada facilitated the Gaudiya Math Brahmacharis to get trained on the first floor of his house in Sitakant Banerjee Lane. So on the first floor of Prabhupada's house, the Gaudiya Math Brahmacharis would get trained in what is known as Harinama Amrit Vyakaran. And one of Srila Saraswati Thakur's scholar disciples, whose name was Dol Govinda Shastri, would teach them. So nowadays in ISKCON in India, we have a concept called base or voice, where near some college we have a rented facility and where students stay and all that. So in fact, one of the first bases was Prabhupada's first floor house. And that's where, they would get trained. And Prabhupada was sitting on the staircase between the ground floor and the first floor chanting japa. And Dol Govinda Shastri came out. And then he sat right next to Prabhupada, who was a Grihastha, that time known as Abhay Babu. So Dol Govinda Shastri told Abhay Babu that I just taught to all of these brahmacharis, Prithvite ache jatanagaradi gram sarvatra prachar hoibe moro nam. In every town and village, the holy name will spread. I spoke this message, but I do not know whether it will ever happen or not. So as soon as Prabhupada heard this, he was chanting japa. He stopped, got up, walked 2 steps down, turned around and faced Dol Govinda Shastri and said, if Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has made that prediction, it must happen. And then Prabhupada took 2 steps down further, turned and pointed towards Dol Govinda Shastri and said, someday a fool who is surrendered at the lotus feet of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur will make it happen. And when Srila Prabhupada made that statement, Dol Govinda Shastri, who was also Srila Saraswati Thakur's disciple, started thinking, will it be me? And Prabhupada took 2 steps down further, turned around and pointed towards Dol Govinda Shastri and said, it will not be you. So Dol Govinda Shastri was thinking, what does Abhay Babu think? He is going to do it or what? How can he do it? He is only a Grihastha who is engaged in business. And the only thing Abhay Babu thinks about is business, business, business. Money, money, money. That was the branding in the Gaudiya Math congregation about Srila Prabhupada. So therefore, bhakti is a very mysterious tattva, and we cannot judge the feelings and the emotions and the kind of faith which someone carries within their heart. So in spite of all the ups and downs which Srila Prabhupada saw in the Gaudiya Math, the easiest thing for Srila Prabhupada to do was to say, all my senior godbrothers who got intimate association of Saraswati Thakur, who got trained by Saraswati Thakur personally, they are all fighting with each other. What is going on? I am not feeling inspired. I think I will just stop all this effort. That was the easiest thing to do. And nobody would have blamed him because the circumstances in Gaudiya Math at that point were not very favorable. But Srila Prabhupada, he kept Saraswati Thakur's vision in his mind, instruction in his mind, and continued. So Prabhupada makes a statement when later he came back to India, and then in Mayapur, Prabhupada was trying to inspire Sridhar Maharaj to come with him to the West and preach, saying that all temples are there, devotees are there, they are very much looking forward to hearing realizations from senior Vaishnavas, you should join us. And Prabhupada kept pushing him for some time, but Sridhar Maharaj was hesitant and he did not make any commitment. And then later Srila Prabhupada told Shrutakirti Prabhu, because Shrutakirti Prabhu said, Prabhupada, you are very generous, you have opened this ISKCON society, now you are inviting Sridhar Maharaj to take over and, what is this? And Prabhupada said, in the 1930s, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur told me that Sridhar Maharaj is very highly qualified, but he is shy. And you should try to inspire him to do much more than what he will do. And so Prabhupada said, a spiritual master's instruction may be postponed for implementation, but not forgotten. And therefore Prabhupada remembered that through all those years. So this instruction was given in 1930s. Prabhupada was trying to implement in the 1970s. And so when the Jaladuta entered, or was just about to enter Boston, Prabhupada was so eager to preach that he was standing right there at the deck of Jaladuta. And typically when ships pass each other, then the captain of both the ships stand on the deck and they wave at each other as part of their kind of protocol. So there was one more ship which was coming from inside Boston and going out, and Jaladuta was entering in. And Prabhupada was standing right there where the captain was about to come and stand. And Prabhupada was standing there and he saw the captain of the other ship and started waving. And the captain of the other ship got bewildered. And he was thinking, hey, the captain is wearing strange clothes and different hairstyle. But anyway, he waved back, but he was wondering, and Prabhupada's effulgent personality struck him. After that ship went for a tour and came back, when that captain of the other ship returned back, he saw in the newspapers Srila Prabhupada's photo and the Kirtans of Tompkins Square Park and Prabhupada's lectures being advertised in 26 2nd Avenue. And then by seeing Prabhupada's photo, he recognized, he said, oh, this is the person who was waving to me. Looks like he has made a lot of progress here. So maybe I should go and meet him. He came to meet Prabhupada, got connected, and then ultimately joined the movement. So, Prabhupada's preaching, we think, began after he reached Boston, but actually it began before reaching also. Because he was so enthusiastic. And so this is a very important principle to appreciate. Next. And then Srila Prabhupada, although he was preaching all over the planet, he was preaching primarily in countries in Europe, in America, in Australia, many countries. And large-scale book distribution was bringing in significant amount of Lakshmi. But Prabhupada invested a very significant amount in India to build temples in Vrindavan, Mayapur and Mumbai. And this is to Srila Prabhupada's credit that he had the vision that we need to create centers where devotees from all over the world can come and experience Krishna consciousness. So therefore these 3 temples are known as the international centers of ISKCON in India. And these 3 temples were built with the sweat and the toil of devotees spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world. Thousands of dollars were being collected by the sale of Prabhupada's books. But Srila Prabhupada did not invest that Lakshmi in creating any particular temple or property. Some of it was used for some purchase of properties, but a full-fledged temple from ground up, from Bhumi Pujan onwards, was only done in India. And it is to the credit of the devotees from across the world, and we have several Srila Prabhupada's disciples here in this audience and also attending the ILS and attending this festival in Mayapur, that in that period from 1970 to 1977, as ISKCON book distribution started growing leaps and bounds, devotees were distributing books in great numbers in different parts of the world. Many of those books were distributed in very, very difficult climatic conditions of the winter of the West. But in spite of all of that, not once did any of those devotees anywhere in any part of the world question Srila Prabhupada that all of these books are being sold in the West and the money is being raised in the West Why are you investing all of that money in India? They did not ask that question because they were surrendered to Srila Prabhupada's will, and the next generation of Indians like us are grateful to all of you for making that sacrifice. And in fact, when Srila Prabhupada was in India, in that period till 1977, he did not even have 20 Indian initiated disciples. And in 1977, nobody could have imagined that there will be a Hare Krishna explosion in India. But we find that because the foundations were laid by Srila Prabhupada in this decision of declaring Mayapur as the international headquarters, Vrindavan, as his place of bhajan, and then Mumbai as his office, and Prabhupada specifically gave instructions, and he spent significant time in Mumbai also. Because of that, Krishna consciousness was established in a big way, and the foundations for ISKCON in India were established there. And from that time onwards, His Holiness Gopal Krishna Goswami Maharaj, Jayapata Swami Maharaj, Bhakticharu Maharaj, Radhanath Maharaj, Loknath Maharaj, Bhanu Swami Maharaj, these Prabhupada disciples who have been leading ISKCON in India, they continued their practice and preaching of Krishna consciousness rock steady. And therefore, India began late compared to America, where things began way back in 1966. And even UK and other places. India began almost in the early 70s. And actual preaching to the Indian people may have begun only in the 80s in a serious way. But whatever may be the case, what has turned out in India's favor has been these few personalities whom I just mentioned, who were leading ISKCON in India. They just continued on steadily. And in the 80s, and then also some in the 90s, many leaders in different parts of ISKCON in the world experienced spiritual difficulties, and they left the practice and had various challenges, because of which leadership vacuum was created and a crisis of faith developed in various countries and temples across the world. And because of that crisis, several devotees left the movement, and many temples, they have not yet recovered even after 25 years of those incidents. And therefore, we are also extremely grateful to these leaders in ISKCON India, who continued their practice of Krishna consciousness steadily, thus demonstrating that apart from all the different strategies, systems, and various other techniques and discussed seminars, let us not forget the most powerful leadership principle is steady personal practice of Krishna consciousness, which is beyond suspicion and doubt. Nothing works more than this, and the testimony of that is how ISKCON in India has grown from strength to strength, to the extent that today 75% of ISKCON's manpower, assets, and other resources are in ISKCON India. And we have more than 700 centers, 250 main temples, but 700 kind of other smaller centers in India. But as I described in the morning, we would be failing in our duty if we did not acknowledge with gratitude the example of all of these devotees from across the world who supported the beginning of ISKCON in India, and others who continued with the leadership of ISKCON in India, thanks to which things are growing strength to strength. And so, when Prabhupada was in Krishna Balram temple, and Prabhupada was really pushing for the opening of the Krishna Balram temple, and the governor was called, and if you read the Leelamrit, you will see how much of anxiety Gurudas Prabhu and Yamuna Devi were in opening of the temple. So Prabhupada had gone along with Yamuna Devi to Chennai, and they were staying at one judge's house. He was a high court judge. And this judge who was hosting Srila Prabhupada and the devotees of ISKCON had a pair of deities. And Yamuna Devi had at that point of time made some dresses for Srila Prabhupada's traveling deities. And so this judge saw those dresses which she was showing to Prabhupada, and he said, "Can I have this dress for my deities?" And Srila Prabhupada said, "Of course, we can give it to you. This is the least we can do for hosting us." So Yamuna Devi was totally disturbed. She said, "Prabhupada, I have made these for your deities. You cannot give it to him." Prabhupada said, "Alright, it's okay. We can make one more dress. Let him have it." She says, No, we should not give." Prabhupada said, "Just give it. And we will benefit from it by giving." So she just gave it. And this judge was so pleased that he turned to Yamuna Devi and said, "Because you have pleased me with this gift, I never allow anybody to take pictures of my deity, but I allow you to take the picture of my deities. And especially the deity of Radharani I have is very special, and I am allowing you to take that picture." So Yamuna Devi took those pictures. And then during the opening of the Krishna Balram temple, when Prabhupada had asked them to make the deities, she went to Pandey Murtiwala, and that picture which she took in Chennai was the reference based on which the Radharani of Vrindavan was manifested, which is arguably one of the most famous. It's a controversial statement to make. We have devotees attached to various deities, but definitely one of the most attractive deities of Srimati Radharani. And so when the opening happened, the governor came, and when the governor came, there was like a huge crowd for that opening. And when the governor was standing in front, there was like a stampede to such an extent that even the governor slipped and fell. So he got bewildered by that crowd. And then the curtains opened, and there was Prabhupada doing that famous arati. And so before that year, in the December month of marathon, it was declared that whoever gets the maximum book distribution scores in the world, they will be allowed in the front row during the first arati of Krishna Balram temple opening. So all the book distributors who had won, they were standing right there, and Tripurari Swami was standing right there. And just behind was a devotee who wanted to take a picture. And this devotee told him, "Can you move a little bit so that I can click Prabhupada's picture?" And he said, "What do you mean? Full month I have been struggling to distribute as many books as possible so that I can experience this moment. And when that moment has come, you are asking me to step aside? How is it possible?" And this devotee said, "Well, if you are standing where you are, only you are able to see Srila Prabhupada and the deities. If you step aside a little bit and allow me to click a picture, the whole world will see the deities and Prabhupada forever." And that devotee could not refuse. He stepped aside. And then we have that famous photo of Prabhupada with full kurta and garlands and everything doing the arati of Krishna Balram temple. And therefore, Prabhupada established temples in Vrindavan, Mayapur and Mumbai, and later this year, His Holiness Giriraj Swami Maharaj is going to come out with his book on the struggle for establishing ISKCON in Mumbai also. And that was also a very crucial decision which Srila Prabhupada made and stuck to that decision. And there is an interesting episode in Saraswati Thakur's life in 1926 or 27. Someone wrote a letter to Saraswati Thakur. We are getting some place in Vile Parla, Juhu. Can we make Gaudiya Math there? And Saraswati Thakur wrote back, no, that is a remote location. We should try to get somewhere closer to the city. And so the Gaudiya Math was actually established by Srila Prabhupada when he was a businessman and a grihastha. He found a property right behind Chopadi temple in what is known as Gwalior Tank, and the Gaudiya Math had their center there. That was downtown. And they considered Vile Parle, Juhu, to be out of the city in the 1920s. And then when Prabhupada got Juhu, that particular land, and Mr. N was trying to bewilder Srila Prabhupada, many people felt we should leave. But Prabhupada had this decision, no, we must stick to this place. And thanks to Srila Prabhupada's determination to continue and decision to not give up that fight, today ISKCON Juhu has one of the most attractive programs in the whole world, and every Sunday at least 30 to 50,000 people are coming for darshan. Go ahead. Yeah. So we discussed about emotional vulnerabilities and rational negligence. Now we'll see some people pressures. Go ahead. Go ahead. So what are some of the people pressures we go through in our decision making? First is a halo effect or relationship bias. Being influenced by the opinion or interests of a towering personality or a close relationship. When Mahaprabhu went to Bengal, there he met Sanatan Goswami, and Sanatan Goswami told Mahaprabhu, Durgama Durjana Jai Nirjana Brindavan Ekaki Jaiba Kiba Shonge Ekajan. You should not go alone. You should actually go alone to Vrindavan and not with a crowd. Vrindavan is not a place to go with such a huge crowd, you will feel distracted. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he actually took that very seriously and made a decision not to go to Vrindavan by that main road, and therefore Mahaprabhu took the route via the Jharikand forest. And Mahaprabhu says later to Balabhadra Bhattacharya, Sanatana Mukhe Krishna Amashikhaila. Through Sanatan Goswami, Krishna gave me this message. And therefore, he was, under that influence. Next. Being forced to take a decision out of force or fear of some powerful person. Sometimes, because of the presence of someone, we are unable to speak up. And many times in our meetings and all, it becomes difficult to vote openly also. Because of the presence, we feel, just because of the personalities being present. And therefore it is, not deliberate sometimes, but it just happens. When Rukmi failed in his effort to prevent Krishna from kidnapping Rukmini, then finally Balramji trapped Rukmi and he held the sword on Rukmi's head and was about to sever his head, and Rukmini started pleading with Krishna to stop this, and Krishna just looked towards Balramji, and Rukmini started pleading with Balramji, and both Balram and Rukmini have a dialogue. And as both of them were arguing, the Bhagavatam describes Krishna was looking in another direction, because Krishna was in a tight spot. If he turns towards Balramji, Balram would tell him, support me. And if he looks at Rukmini, she would say, support me. And therefore Krishna was totally bewildered in that state. And so this happens often, and this is also one of the effects of the situation we are in. Next. Bad counsel. Being influenced by bad counsel, example is Manthara. That Manthara ultimately agitated the mind of Kaikeyi. As I described before, Dasharath Maharaj ruled for 60,000 years. After ruling for 60,000 years, he was about to take retirement and he decided to make Ram the king, and he called the entire Ayodhya. And then he announced to all the Ayodhya Vasis, I have decided to retire and make Ram the king. There was a tumultuous sound, huge clapping by everybody. And Dasharath got bewildered and he asked the minister, why everybody is so ecstatic? And minister said, everybody in Ayodhya feels that in 60,000 years, this is the best decision you have made in life. So when Dasharath Maharaj heard this, for a moment he felt insecure. He said, oh, you think I am so stupid? I am so useless that people are celebrating my departure? So the minister said, no, it is not your fault, but your son is so super excellent. He has such divine qualities that you cannot help it. It is not your fault. So Dasharath Maharaj decided to make Ram the king. And then Manthara is basically an agent of the demigods. Why? The demigods wanted Ravana to be killed. And they saw that Ram and Sita are happy with each other. And life is going on in Ayodhya blissfully. And the demigods thought, Ram is having a nice party here, but unless something is done to kill Ravana, he will forget also. So we have to make Lord Ram remember that he has come for a mission. He is simply on a yatra, he has to do some seva also. So therefore, they agitated Manthara and deputed her. And she comes and tells Kaikeyi that Ram is going to become king. Kaikeyi was very happy. Fantastic. But your king, your son will not become king. Kaikeyi said, so what? Ram is like my son only. Your son will not be able to control the kingdom. Ram will control the whole kingdom. Kaikeyi said, no problem. So Manthara was getting bewildered that all my plans are failing. So then Manthara finally said, if Ram becomes the king, Kaushalya will become the Rajmata, and you, Kaikeyi, have to become Dasi of Kaushalya. What do you say? And that was the point when Kaikeyi got agitated. And then she banished through Dasharath Maharaj, Lord Ram. So therefore, the entire Ayodhya collapsed after that. Dasharath Maharaj died. The Ayodhya Vasis were bewildered. And practically the entire Ayodhya appeared as if it was desolate, struck by some deadly disease. And when Bharat Maharaj started ruling over the kingdom, he would go to take bath in the Sarayu early in the morning at 1:30, because when Ayodhya Vasis would see Bharat Maharaj, they would take stones and hit him, accusing him for being the person responsible for sending Ram to the forest. But Bharat Maharaj was very tolerant and he continued that. And it is said that Bharat Maharaj used the paduka or the footwear of Lord Ram and placed those footwear on the throne and made them the king. And then when Ayodhya Vasis would come with taxes to deposit, Bharat Maharaj would take it. And when they would ask for expense, Bharat Maharaj would tell them, ask the footwear. And in this way, he minimized the expenses. So in 14 years, the economy of Ayodhya became 10 times. Thanks to Bharat Maharaj's novel administration. And we find that Dasharath Maharaj with 4 sons died without having any of the sons by his side. And what the biggest armies in the world could not do in defeating Ayodhya. Ayodhya means that city which cannot be defeated in war. Ayodhya. That which could not be defeated in war. Any armor could not defeat Ayodhya. Rumor defeated Ayodhya. So rumor is more powerful than armor. And therefore we should not underestimate the power of rumor. And all of that happened without WhatsApp. So you can imagine how the mantra tattvas will be more powerful now with all kinds of facility available. So bad counsel. Next. Being influenced by fear of public response. So when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was actually performing his pastimes, he was very careful that nobody should criticize a sannyasi. Sannyasira alpachidra sarvaloke goye. But sometimes if we take decision without having the capacity to execute, but just because we are afraid of public response. In 2009 when we were in Yatra here in Mayapur, that was the second year when we were running our mega kitchen. And many devotees started coming and giving feedback. Every day you are giving same breakfast, poha, upma, poha, what is this? You should give pav bhaji. We are all from Mumbai. We need pav bhaji. I said, who will make pav bhaji here? Difficult to get all the ingredients and all that. Forget it. And someone came to me and said, you can do anything. And I thought, yeah, I can do anything. Okay. Let me make pav bhaji. So without taking full team into confidence, we said, okay, let's go ahead. And the pav was ordered in Calcutta. And the person who was supposed to deliver, he said, we will make it fresh one night before. And then overnight the truck will come and deliver. I said, it is too close, too risky. He says, no, devotees should be given fresh. So anyway, I couldn't argue. So early in the morning, I went into the kitchen to make the bhaji and I called the person who was in the truck with the pav. Where have you reached? So that night was Kali Puja and the truck was stuck 3 hours away. And when I asked him, where are you? He said, just now coming. So GPS can be successful in many parts of the world, but in India it will have challenges. And I thought, I asked him, shall I start cooking the bhaji? Pav is coming on. Yeah, you go ahead. So we started and by 7 o'clock bhaji was ready, but pav is nowhere to be seen. And then when I tried to call him, another standard operating practice in India is when something goes wrong, switch off mobile. So mobile is switched off. So then people came on time because they may come late for katha, but for prasad everybody is on time. Long line right here, next to senior brahmachari ashram all the way. And the line reached the exit gate on the main road of Mayapur temple, outside road. Scary sight. And people were coming in and asking, hey, what is the breakfast? I said, bread and jam. I said, what? Yeah, traffic jam. So when you don't have any prasad to give, you can only entertain them. And then some of the people started commenting, "Arey, do pav par khade hain, ek pav nahi mil raha hai humko. We are standing on 2 feet, we are not getting one." So then the truck came and the devotees saw this long line and he asked the last guy standing, "What is this line for?" And they say some pav is coming from Calcutta, we are waiting. This devotee got bewildered that they'll thrash me if I go in. So he told the driver, I am going for Ganga Bath. You take the truck in. And so finally the pav arrived half an hour late only. But when the long line is waiting, half an hour appears like a yuga. And therefore, we realized that sometimes when you do you take a decision thinking about public opinion, but not having done the full due diligence, then it may create a bigger problem. Activism, decision being manipulated by activist lobbying. विषयीरा वार्ता सुनि क्षुब्ध होए मन ताते इह रही मोरा नहीं प्रयोजन. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also was many times complaining to the devotees, if you keep pushing me and force me to engage in some kind of decision against my principles, I will leave Puri and go to Alarnath. So decision being manipulated by activist lobbying. So all the devotees would try to push Mahaprabhu to something, and if Mahaprabhu was not in favor, he would just be very clear and say, I will go to Alarnath. Do not push me. And therefore, whatever may happen, we should not take a decision because we are afraid of some kind of activism or lobbying. The decisions must be taken based on principles. So in this regard, Antalila 9th chapter, you can go through the deliverance of Gopinath Patnaik, a very important chapter for all the Grihasthas, and how Mahaprabhu remained neutral, because Gopinath Patnaik used to sell some horses. He owed some money to the king. So the prince came asking, where is the money? So Patnaik said, I don't have money, but I have some horses. Can you take the horses? So prince said, okay. So the Gopinath Patnaik said, how much do you value the horses for? So actually the horses were worth 100,000 or something. But the prince looked at the horses and said, they are not even worth 1,000. So Gopinath Patnaik became angry. Hey, such expensive horses and you are giving such low valuation? So the prince had a habit of moving his neck upwards while talking. So Gopinath Patnaik made a comment, my horses do not move the head up like this, like you. So the king became very angry, the prince became angry, and he immediately instructed Gopinath Patnaik to be killed on the Changa. And it's a whole pastime of how all the devotees were running to Mahaprabhu and saying, Gopinath Patnaik is on the Changa, is about to be killed. And Mahaprabhu is saying, he has a certain equation with the king and the prince. Do not drag me into this business enterprise. And so the purports which Srila Prabhupada gives in that is very interesting. And it was Ramananda Rai's family, Bhavananda Rai and all the others. But then finally Mahaprabhu gives the instruction how we must perform our duties properly. Next. Groupthink. Lack of ownership in a group because of unassigned responsibilities and conflict avoidance within the group becomes the objective of decision making. Okay. And many times it does happen. रामानंद राय आछे गोदावरी तीरे अधिकारी होयंते हो विद्यानगरे शूद्र विषय ज्ञाने उपेक्षा न करिबे अमार वचने तारे अवश्य मिलिबे. Mahaprabhu is told by Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, when you go to Godavari, do meet Rai Ramananda, because he externally appears to be a governor, but he is actually a very great devotee. You should meet him at any cost. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu meets Rai Ramananda, and then in the course of his conversation, Mahaprabhu does not agree upon any of the verses he quotes till he comes to Jnane Prayasa Madhupasya Namanta Eva Jivanti Sanmukaritam Bhavadiya Varta, which says, that as Krishna conscious devotees, our main responsibility is to be engaged in hearing and chanting and service in the assembly of Vaishnavas and take serious responsibilities. Tanu Van Manobhir, with body, mind, and words. And therefore, each one of us who is practicing Krishna consciousness has a duty to take serious responsibilities in the practice of Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada was in Bhubaneswar. Gaur Govinda Maharaj was there and he was translating Prabhupada's Bhagavatam into Udiya. Prabhupada turned to him and said, "Why is the Odia translation going so slow?" And Gaur Govinda Maharaj said, "Srila Prabhupada, there is nobody here in the temple to manage, so half my time goes in managing." Because some ISKCON temples, there are so few devotees that the president is the resident and the resident is the president. Nobody else is there. What to do? So Prabhupada said, we should make someone else the manager, but there is nobody, Prabhupada. So Prabhupada saw one devotee walking by. And he was scheduled to go to New York the next day. Prabhupada looked at him and said, we will make him the manager. So he called for that devotee. This devotee came and offered obeisance. Prabhupada said, I want you to stay here and manage this place. The devotee got a shock of his life. Srila Prabhupada, tomorrow I am going to New York. Prabhupada said, no problem. You can stay here and manage. Says, Prabhupada, Indian weather doesn't suit me. Prabhupada said, only when you stay longer time it will suit you. Says, but Prabhupada, the food, I cannot digest the food. Prabhupada said, I will write down what you should eat, what you should not eat. Everything will be digested. But Prabhupada, there is a new department they have started in New York just for me to take over. Prabhupada said, we will assign someone else to take that. But Prabhupada, I cannot get along with the local GBC. Prabhupada said, today only I changed the GBC. He did not have anything remaining. So finally he thought, let me use the Brahmastra. And he said, Prabhupada, I am so busy morning till night, I am not able to complete my 16 rounds. At least in New York, I will do my 16 rounds properly. Prabhupada said, if you are busy morning till night serving Krishna, even if you don't do 16 rounds, it is okay. So this devotee said, Prabhupada, what do you want me to do? Prabhupada said, I already told you, stay here and manage. Next, failure of consensus. Not involving the stakeholders and failing to create consensus amongst the stakeholders. And this is very interesting. Vrindavan was created, as I described in my other talk, thanks to the collaboration between three parties: the Mughals, the Rajputs, and the Gaudiyas. The Gaudiyas had the spiritual power, the Mughals had the political power, and the Rajputs had the financial power. So all three together collaborated. And in the period from 1516, when Rupa and Sanatana entered Vrindavan, all the way to 1670, was the golden period of the growth of Vrindavan because of this collaboration. But after Akbar departed in 1605, Jahangir became the emperor, and then Jahangir's son, Shah Jahan, became the emperor. Shah Jahan's son was Dara Shuko, eldest son, and the youngest son was Aurangzeb. Shah Jahan was very favorably disposed towards Dara Shuko. He wanted to make him the emperor. Aurangzeb did not like that at all. So in that collaboration, during that time, the Rajput king was Jai Singh I. And Jai Singh I felt slighted by Dara Shuko, and he felt that Dara Shuko is not having good feelings towards him. He did not like Dara Shuko. Aurangzeb caught hold of that, and he inspired Jai Singh I to support Aurangzeb's coup attempt to take over and kill Dara Shuko. Aurangzeb on his own could never have done it. But the effort of Aurangzeb to destroy his own brother, Dara Shuko, was manifested by the creators of Vrindavan, the Rajput king. Jai Singh was the one who killed the competitor of Aurangzeb. Jai Singh I was the successor of the builders of Vrindavan, and by his efforts, he put the future destroyer of Vrindavan in throne. So therefore, history teaches us many lessons. And then Jai Singh and his son Ram Singh inspired Aurangzeb to make treaty with Shivaji Maharaj. Shivaji Maharaj was called, and then he was imprisoned improperly by Aurangzeb. And then when he escaped, Aurangzeb became very angry, and he thought Jai Singh and Ram Singh together have collaborated, conspired to free Shivaji Maharaj. He became so angry that the collaboration between the Rajputs and the Mughals broke down. The trust broke down, and because of that, ultimately, Aurangzeb attacked first Varanasi, because as I described, Tapan Mishra was brought by Mahaprabhu from Bangladesh to Varanasi, because the head priests of Varanasi were the gurus, Raj Gurus of the Rajputs. So he destroyed the Kashi Vishwanath temple, he destroyed the Keshavji temple in Mathura, and then he destroyed other temples in Vrindavan. So therefore, sometimes when there is a failure of consensus, it can lead to devastating effects. Next. Then we have some situational complexities. One, information deficit and uncertainty. Not enough information is available in order to be sure to make a decision, and questions on reliability of available information and uncertainty about the available alternatives. And it happens many times when we do not know exactly in this situation what to do. Apne acharya keh no kore prachar, prachara kore na keh no koren achar. Someone preaches, others follow, but very few, O Haridas, are the ones who both preach and follow. And therefore, there are many, many things like this, issues about how to take a decision in the absence of the full information. Right? There was controversy in ISKCON about the Jiva fall, the fall of the Jiva, where it came from, and Prabhupada has given certain version, and then some of the Acharya's version is different, and then it creates a whole debate. And there are enough complexities in our philosophy and enough complexities in the social and cultural dimensions of life to create this kind of, situations. Next, linked decisions. Complex decision situations where one's decision is linked to several others and can't be viewed in isolation. Okay, it cannot be viewed in isolation. They are all related and connected to each other. That is how it is. And so when we find that Hanumanji is in Lanka and is unable to find Sita, he is in so much distress, Hanumanji becomes morose. And Hanumanji starts thinking, if I cannot find Sita, then all of my other monkey comrades who have come with me here on the search, they will commit suicide. When Sugriva hears about this, he will commit suicide. When Ram and Lakshman see Sugriva and the monkeys committing suicide, they will commit suicide. When Bharat and Shatrughna hear about this, they will commit suicide, and because of that, whole Ayodhya will commit suicide. Better that I commit suicide. So Hanumanji was kind of totally in that bewilderment. Then finally he decided, no, I should continue trying. And Hanumanji made one more effort to search for Sita, and then ultimately he did find Sita. And so many such complex situations arise when things are related to each other. We were, making our breakfast in our yatra way back in 2008 in Vrindavan, and one group of devotees came up and said, "Arey, you are cooking every day, you are getting all the mercy of the devotees, so much blessings. We also need mercy. Allow us to cook also. So I said, okay, you also cook. And then they were cooking for the first time there in that yatra. They were not used to certain things. So they were cooking poha or chipped rice. And the poha turned out to be very hard. And I realized when I finally saw the final product that today will be a hard day for me. Because so many people will come and give feedbacks. So people were giving so many feedbacks, and then one devotee walked up to me, and he's a very heavy devotee who loves giving feedback. Some devotees I called feedback priya. They love giving feedback. And he came up to me and he said, "Arey, what kind of chipped rice you fed us? My teeth fell off. What was this poha?" I said, "This was not poha chipped rice, this was cornflakes. You're supposed to have mixed with your herbal tea and taken." He said, "What? You never told me." I said, "You never asked me." He got sufficiently bewildered and I escaped from there. And then I realized that, we may take a decision thinking that, okay, what's the problem? But then there are various things which are connected, which we may not realize at that moment. Next. This is a very interesting slide on ethical paradoxes. And how many of you have been put in this situation? You can just go through this. Duty versus emotion. Pragmatism versus idealism. Popularity versus purity. Accommodative or protective. Mission or missionary. Analytical or intuitive. Optimistic or critical. Authoritative or collaborative. This one slide itself we can give full seminar. And how many of you as leaders have been caught in one or many of these ethical paradoxes? Raise your hand. So therefore, both appear to be right. Both are right, but you have to choose. That is known as an ethical paradox. Is it not? And therefore, next. Inadequate authority. One may have been given the onus of decision making without sufficient authority to influence others and execute the decision. So this is another situation which we often face in ISKCON. And when Mahaprabhu was in Vrindavan, he is with this servant Balabhadra Bhattacharya. Whoever comes to Mahaprabhu saying, "Please come to our house for prasad," Mahaprabhu would say, "Go and ask Balabhadra Bhattacharya." And then when they would go to Balabhadra Bhattacharya, he would try to accommodate someone. And then thousands of people are asking Balabhadra Bhattacharya, and Mahaprabhu would disappear in the forest. Nowhere to be found. So he was getting bewildered. He approached Mahaprabhu one day and he says, "Sahite na pari amer loker gadabadi, nimantrana lagi loka kore huda hudi." People are competing with each other to invite you for prasadam. And they come early in the morning searching for you. Pratah kale aise lok tomare na paye lok mora matha khaye. People come in the morning searching, "Where is Mahaprabhu? Where is Mahaprabhu?" They don't find you, they start eating my head. And therefore, he says, Balabhadra Bhattacharya, who is with bliss personified, Satchidananda Vigraha, Mahaprabhu himself, what does he say? Udvigna hoila pran sohite na pari. Prabhur agyaya jai shridhari. I am in total anxiety in your association. I have to be honest, my dear Lord. I am in Vrindavan with Radha Krishna nahi anya, but I am in total anxiety. I want to get out of here. Devotees aspire to come to Vrindavan. I aspire to get out of here. And therefore, Yadyapi Vrindavana tyage nahi prabhur man, bhakta ichha purite kohe madhur vachan. Mahaprabhu had been planning from January 14th, 1510 when he took sannyas to enter Vrindavan. Finally, Mahaprabhu managed to enter Vrindavan only on the last day of Kartik 1515. Kartik Purnima, Mahaprabhu entered Vrindavan after 5 years of wait. And he could not stay even for more than 1 month because of Balabhadra Bhattacharya's anxiety, because he felt, I do not have sufficient authority to decide here, I don't know what to do. Next, conflicts of interest. There are multiple stakeholders with conflicting interests, and when all of these happen, it becomes difficult to arrive at any consensus. Go ahead, next. So we come up on the solution part. Enablers. Yeah. This is, both are over. Next. Yeah. Go back. Go back. So I'll just take everybody through, because this is the last session, what we have done so far in the solutions to decision making. Heads up decision making involves 3 things: flexibility, keeping aside assumptions, prejudices, and adapting; objectivity, evaluate objectively various scenarios and solutions based on values; third, creativity, conceive of innovative approaches and alternative solutions. So this is flexibility, objectivity, and creativity in heads-up decision making. Next. Sensitivity, equanimity, and affability within heart full, being intuitive and feeling the pulse of the people, working towards consensus. Equanimity, keeps one's composure and not be swayed by polarities. Balance duty and emotion. Be friendly and approachable. Be affable. Next. And hands-on decision making, you have to be brave, you have to be courageous and ready to take risk as required. Agility, you have to respond in real time. And third, tenacity, resolve to stick to and execute the decision and not keep oscillating between polarities. Next. So these are the 9 decision-making competencies. The 9 decision-making competencies which will help you in decision-making as a leader. Next. We end with a 10-step head, hand, heart decision-making process. Go ahead. Prepare a broad problem statement. Define your identity role with respect to the problem. That means this is the problem, and I am approaching the problem because I am a husband, or I am president, or I am disciple. Your identity with respect to that problem has to be defined. Identify your key objectives and purpose. Step 3. Identify your key objective and purpose. So typically in GBC college presentations, we give case studies and then groups of people. It is only possible for 25-30 group. Then they try to implement this as part of that learning. Go ahead. Identify psychological blind spots or social pressures which may distort your decision-making ability. Next, identify the stakeholders and understand the aspirations and apprehensions of the stakeholders. Sixth, develop a range of good creative alternatives considering 2 things: your objective and the viewpoints of the various stakeholders. Having done this, now you are good to go. Incorporate the effect of uncertainty in the potential alternatives to gauge the results or outcome. Because in every solution, some uncertainty may manifest. Next, distance yourself from the situation emotionally and check whether judgment is being affected by undue psychological blind spot or social pressure. Take a step back. In the light of all above, based on these 8, judge the alternatives and make the decision. 10th, most important, stick to and execute the decision. So this is the 10-step process. Next. And in this way, we are very happy to share with you the entire Art of Decision Making seminar over the last 3 sessions. Thank you all very much.